I've said many times how much I deeply enjoy the comments and the comment section under YouTube. I really do, and sometimes, particularly the longer ones, I read, and sometimes I read them a little later, but um, some are really good. There's quite a long comment the other day by Segulin, I think is the name. And so thank you for your insightful comments, which touch on some critical elements surrounding the nature of referendums. I've been encouraged to use the Latin plural, as I don't think referendum is really a Latin word, certainly not from the period of the Roman Republic or the Empire. I simply defy that. And the subsequent political weight of the referendum. Your remarks highlight a significant point. The 2016 referendum, the Brexit referendum, was advisory by design, but evolved into a de facto compulsory mandate that changed the course of our history. So referendums in the UK, such as the 2016 EU referendum, are traditionally advisory because we have a representative democracy where the MPs we elect in a traditional general election or by-election are there to take decisions on our behalf. They don't have to consult us. And the European Union Referendum Act 2015 set the legal groundwork for the Brexit vote without binding the government to act on the result. And that's an important preamble. However, David Cameron called for the referendum to manage internal divisions within the Conservative Party and counter the rise of UKIP, which capitalised on anti-EU sentiment, and also, because of the first-past-the-post system, it scored the most enormous popular vote and got 0 MPs in the House of Commons. So Cameron's public commitment then to respect the referendum's outcome elevated the status of the referendum beyond a mere consultation, and this was perhaps a strategic or a stupid move to reassure voters of the process's significance and integrity. Yet, as Segulin points out, Cameron's gamble backfired spectacularly when the Leave side won with a 51.9% of the vote, a narrow margin that would haunt UK politics thereafter. But as Mercutio says, it's just a prick, but it's enough. And although the referendum was legally non-binding, public expectation, goaded by Cameron, transformed it into an effective political directive. The Leave campaign's success, with its simple majority victory, created immediate pressure for action, and ignoring or undermining the result would have triggered accusations of betrayal, which in itself would probably have rocked the democratic process and potentially destabilised the government. This was particularly poignant given the promises made by political leaders that the outcome would be respected. And as for undermining or destabilising the government, well, the process of trying to engineer Brexit destabilised the government and continues to haunt the British establishment. So I don't think anyone has won in this particular compromise. Cameron's swift resignation signified that he could not credibly oversee the implementation of a decision he'd campaigned against. I think he was wrong. I think, frankly, he was a pillock to go. That did not help the stability. His departure transferred the responsibility to his successor, Theresa May, another person without competence, who adopted a staunch position: Brexit means Brexit, which is the most ridiculous slogan, which means nothing, which is probably what she intended. And her dithering, her government treated the referendum as a binding mandate that she hoped would end up being delayed and pushed into the pushed into the hedge, really, driven by the necessity to honour public opinion, prevent political fallout, but ideally do nothing. And the advisory vote thus gained binding force through her political actions and promises, which I'm sure she didn't feel she would ever have to realise. The Supreme Court's ruling in Miller versus Secretary of State for exiting the European Union emphasised that triggering Article 50 required Parliament's approval. And while this confirmed that the referendum itself lacked legal compulsion, no matter what Cameron had said, or what Theresa May insisted, the political reality was that Parliament's endorsement was seen as a moral and democratic necessity. MPs, recognising the potential public backlash, largely conceded to the result despite the narrow victory margin. The Brexit vote's narrow margin, 52 to 48%, not indeed, in fact, 52, less than that, raised questions about whether such a momentous constitutional change could have, should have, or could have required a supermajority threshold. As Segulin and many others have noted, a simple majority is sufficient for general elections where policies can be reversed in subsequent cycles, but referendums on significant issues such as the EU membership present far-reaching, often irreversible consequences, and this was not accounted for in the referendum's design, which didn't stipulate the need for a more convincing majority or regional consent across the UK's constituent nations. And this is, therefore, the failure of Cameron. So, you've heard me talk about the failure of Theresa May and Boris Johnson to actually get an effective Brexit done. But the Brexit law on which the Brexit referendum was based was itself full of stupidity. And Cameron should be held responsible for that stupidity. The post-referendum, the path to implementing Brexit was filled with, I think politely we call them challenges, but complex negotiations and the unresolved status of Northern Ireland, the absence of structures like the Dublin Protocol for handling cross-channel migrants, added to the strain, and the fact that Lord Frost didn't see any need to implement an alternative, to negotiate an alternative as an urgent proposition. Additionally, the Windsor Framework, which later emerged as a compromise negotiated by Chris Heaton Harris, attempted to balance the regulatory alignment of the European Union in Ireland and its links to Northern Ireland and UK sovereignty, a testament to Brexit's uneven execution. And all of this should have been anticipated long before we even got to the point where the 2016 referendum result was announced. Segulin's comments encapsulate the confusion surrounding the advisory status of Brexit, of the Brexit referendum, and the political risks of ignoring it. And the outcome was treated as binding, not by legal obligation, but by the immense political pressure and the stupid promises made by Cameron and his government. The shift from advisory to compulsory action highlights the tension between direct democracy and parliamentary sovereignty. We don't have direct democracy, and the referendum vote was not an act of direct democracy. It has been interpreted, or it has been given that value, but only with hindsight, and the repercussions, including the economic and the political challenges that continue to unfold, and the questions about whether there is any Brexit benefit to be acknowledged or identified or found, isolated, exposed, celebrated, raise questions about whether a different approach, such as requiring a supermajority or ensuring regional consent, might have led to a different outcome or a more sustainable path where the country was fully behind this decision. It seems clear to me that while the 2016 referendum was advisory in law, it became a political imperative because of insufficient homework. It's a problem that I keep sort of jabbing my finger at. A lot of the Conservative ministers who were both in government and who are now in opposition, they don't do the homework. This was beautifully exposed by Liz Truss, who famously didn't like to be given the full document. She likes a summary on one side of A4. But I think she wasn't alone in this laziness, this arrogance. The Brexit, which was put on a plate, this outcome forged by public expectation, political pledges, and the pressure, lots of P's there, we could think of a few more, and the pressure to maintain democratic legitimacy, I think would give a caution for today. Were a referendum to be held now, with the Brexit realities evident, would it lead to the same result? Would we define a referendum to have a greater majority than a simple majority? As Seguin hints, it's an open question for future historians and political scientists. And there is absolutely no doubt that the Brexit referendum that took place, the legislation that underpinned it, the execution of Brexit, were all extraordinarily flawed. The referendum itself, the 2016 vote, was a democratic exercise according to the rules that have been laid down. And we cannot ignore that. But everything leading up to that, everything following that, has been an example of political indecision, stupidity, or simply blind ideology and wishful thinking. And it gave the European negotiators significant opportunity to make the negotiation as difficult as possible, because they could see so clearly that we weren't up to the task. And that's an appalling admission. And as I say, Liz Truss sums it all up. But Liz Truss also sums it all up not only with her A4 laziness, but also with her inability to do her homework in front of Sergei Lavrov and her insistence that Rostov-on-Don was Ukraine territory. The mixture of arrogance and stupidity and laziness, I think, is not something we can simply blame Liz Truss for. Yes, she is responsible for that disaster, but I think she is part of a crowd of Conservative and Labour elite who may or may not hold ministerial power at some point, who simply don't do the homework, who assume the civil service will do it. Well, the civil service have been on a go slow since Blunkett's time, certainly since Theresa May announced the hostile environment in the Home Office. And I have no doubt that the civil service is frustrated at having to do the work that ministers cannot be bothered to do. Give me a minister who actually reads the briefs, and I will start to have a little bit more respect for them. But so far, I don't see very much evidence of that. I haven't seen very much evidence of that since 2013, 2014. We've had a lazy batch of politicians, and I don't think that's going to change very soon.